Alright, now that we're actually ready to fly, the first thing that we're going to want to do before we actually pull the plane out is just check to make sure that we have everything that we need in order to get the plane up and moving relatively quickly. So planes, specifically scout planes in this case, need either diesel or petrol. You spawn in with a little bit, just enough to get yourself to a nearby fuel source. So before we do that, we are going to want to locate on the runway where the fuel sources are. I've already checked this. So over here, these are heavy oils, and over here are our petrols. So in this case, we're going to run over to our petrol station where we can refuel, and we're going to grab one container of petrol. What we're also going to do is make sure that we submit or at least drop or get rid of everything else in our inventory. That way, there is nothing stopping us from immediately getting into the plane when we pull it out, as opposed to having the plane in there, preventing other people from pulling things out while you're in there. Another thing that you might want to get your hands on is some 20 millimeter ammo. Unfortunately, in the public stockpile here, we don't have any, or a crate of 5. Sometimes you may be able to find it at some bunker bases nearby. The plane itself will take 3, so just something to consider. So in here we have 17, so we're going to pull the plane up to the fuel sources over here, and then probably down here to the bunker base to fill it up full of ammo. Sometimes people have pallets of them, as you can see over there. There's actually some in the back of that truck, but I don't know if it's locked, and I don't know if they have any plans for it, so I'm going to leave that maybe for the fighters. We'll restock from the bunker base. So now that we have our fuel in hand, what we're going to do is we're going to press E. We're going to open up our stockpile that we were storing our planes in from before, right here, and we will pull out one of our planes. Assembles pretty quick. If we run over to it, you can see that it is locked for us. What we're going to do is we're going to press E on it. We're going to change the fuel from diesel to petrol. Now we have the diesel in our inventory. If we want to, we can leave this in the public stockpile of the aircraft depots. That way people can use it if they want to. And we will pull out our petrol into our third slot, press 3, and refill our plane. Just that way we have plenty to move around. Awesome. We'll press Q to get into the plane, and our goal is to get ourselves over to the fuel burritos over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my thrust up to 20 to get myself moving. I'm going to get out of the way, so that way if this guy, for example, wants to pull out a plane, he can. And once I'm out, I'm going to hold down space to apply the brakes, and then I'm going to turn my thrust back down to 0. So the first thing I'm going to be covering here is going to be taxiing. I went over this a little bit last time, but here I'll go into a little bit more depth. At the end of the day, pressing space will cause you to brake unless you are reversing, at which point you will need to move forward in order, or get a positive thrust in order for the brake to actually work. At 100 thrust, you actually will go forward a little bit more. So the brake only works so much, unfortunately. So one thing you are going to want to keep an eye on in the beginning is going to be your thrust while you are flying a plane. So in this case, because I can no longer go forward, I'm going to back up by holding down the spacebar and scrolling backwards, which will cause me to back up. I can use A and D to rotate. In this case, I will rotate myself to face further down the runway. And then when I get there, I'm going to get my thrust into a 0 value, so that way I do not move at all. And then I will put my thrust into a positive value, preferably 20%, and let go of spacebar, which again will allow me to move. In this case, I'm going to slowly be driving over to those fuel burritos that I was talking about earlier. I will change my directions, that way I come up beside them. And then I will hold down the spacebar and change my thrust to 0 to come to a complete stop, and then I will exit the plane. From here, I will go up to the plane. I will press E in order to open its inventory, and I'm going to click the refuel button, which will send a line from the container into the plane, which will cause it to fill up on fuel. The other thing I will also do is I'll come over to the bunker base that we talked about earlier. I will grab some 20 millimeter rounds. You carry them in your hands. These are not something that goes into your inventory. You go up to the plane and get yourself in a snug corner and press V in order to submit it. I will also grab another one here, assemble it, bring it over to the plane. If you, for example, press V on the plane over here, it'll say the 20 millimeter has been dropped instead of has been submitted. As you can see, it's on the ground there. You just press V to pick it back up again, and then press V to submit it. Perfect. So now I'll hop back in the plane here. And on the top left, you'll see I have 2 rounds of ammo in reserve. I will press R to reload, and that will put it into the gun where I can now shoot it. The one thing to note is that you can put another round, or you can put another 20 millimeter inside of the planes. That way you have 35 in the gun plus 2 in reserve. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to keep it as it is instead of refilling to full. So now that I have full fuel and presumably I have ammo in the vehicle, the next part is going to be getting over to the runway. So again, taxiing. Just get your thrust up to 20% is all that you really need, and we're gonna begin to start moving. One thing to note actually is that when you first get into a plane, if you get the thrust up and you do not start moving, tap the spacebar, and that will cause you to keep going. There is I don't know if it's necessarily a bug or a permanent or a temporary fix to prevent you from taking off super fast. But anyways, as you can see, I managed to work my way over to the runway. If you are still new to taxiing, it is worthwhile just moving around. One note about taxiing that I do want to teach people is that if you wish to turn very quickly, one thing that you can do is have your thrust at 0, or start by doing one of these things, which is moving the opposite direction. And then if I want to make a very quick turn to the right, what I will do is scroll up aggressively and hold down D and let go of the spacebar, and that will cause me to do basically one of these, which is a very quick way to turn around while you are taxiing if you need to. This works mostly in the scout planes, not so much in other planes, but it is something to note. I'm going to hold down spacebar and scroll my thrust back down to 0. Awesome. So now that we've known that, I'm now going to get myself lined up on the runway. Scout planes take off very, very fast. In fact, you can take off almost entirely horizontally, so do not worry about getting to all the way to the end of the runway there. We will be totally fine if we get to, for example, here or even further. So let's line ourselves up with the runway while holding down spacebar. And now the simple goal is going to be to scroll all the way up, let go of spacebar, and hold the S key while steering yourself to keep yourself in the runway. So I'm going to let go of spacebar, scroll all the way up, I'm holding down S, and we are off. Oh, in the beginning, we're just going to climb all the way to the maximum height. So we're going to get up as high as we can. It is raining, so it is a very cloudy day down here in Ashfields. And we are going to get up to the maximum altitude, which it will be 100. And then you will see at this point that it will level you out. Now that we're at this height, one thing we don't want to do is run into mountains, like for example over there. So what we're going to do is we're going to scroll all the way down. That's actually a lie. My bad. We don't want to do that. Anyways, okay, so while we are up here and we have we're at the top of our height, we're actually going to press F in order to raise our landing gear, and we are going to scroll all the way down in order to get our speed to the lowest possible. Just that way we don't end up flying ourselves into mountains or anything like that. So now that we're up here and we are flying around, one thing you can attempt to do is start beginning to turn. Unfortunately, because it is so cloudy, it is a little bit difficult to determine where it is that we are. This is where the map comes in, and also just making sure that your mouse is nice and far up ahead so that way you can see if you're going to be running into any mountains or anything like that. So as you begin to turn, take a look down here. You will notice that when you turn, you actually continue to turn when you stop or when you let go of A or D. So what this means, the higher speed that you are, actually the faster that you level out. But it is something to note that if you do intend to make a turn, basically the moment that you are at 90 or you're at your full tilt, you will continue to turn another 90 degrees before leveling out. Actually, oftentimes a little bit more than 90 degrees. So just something to note when you are turning. This is one of the difficulties in planes in terms of lining yourself up. So keep that in mind as you are flying around. So I'm going to go down a little bit lower. Hopefully when you're flying it isn't actually raining. So I'm just going to go down low enough that I can see the ground. Perfect. As you can see, I'm still over the runway. And you'll also notice that as I dove there, I actually gained speed. So something to note that as you are flying around, even if you're at low speed, if you need to pick up speed quickly, you can always put your nose down, which will cause you to pick up speed. going to continue to get some height here just to keep myself at a nice safe distance from the ground. Just to show again, I turn left, I let go of left, and as you can see, I continue to turn about another 90 degrees. So if I want to turn that way, I'm basically going to let go at around here, and it will cause me to turn in that direction. Awesome. So now that we're here, you can practice with scrolling up in order to get additional speed, which again can help you escape some situations. At the end of the day, though, scout planes are relatively slow, but when you are in a dogfight or in a fight with another plane, you want maximum mobility. Therefore, you want your speed as high as it can possibly go. However, you do burn more gas doing this, so going down to a low speed will actually cause you to burn much less gas. One thing that I will bring up is that at any time you can press F to lower your landing gear, but notice how I did this here, and now I'm at 0 thrust, and I will soon begin to fall out of the sky. That is one of the reasons why we do press F to raise our landing gear when we do get up in the sky. It's just so that way you do not accidentally get into a situation where you give yourself 0 thrust and begin to fall. However, if you're ever in a situation where you do need to, for whatever reason, slow your speed down incredibly, that is one way to do it, is by lowering your landing gear. Alright, so one of the first things that you may notice is that if you do want to turn really quickly, one way to do that is by pressing up and turning at the same time at a higher speed. You will actually turn a lot faster than you will if you just turn like this. So just something to know, that you do turn faster while you are heading up and turning. You also turn faster. I'm going to gain some height for this. You do turn faster while you are going down and turning as well. Both work. Another thing to note too is that when you turn, if you take a look at your altitude down in the bottom left there, while you are turning you do lose altitude. So just something to note. This is more pronounced in other planes rather than the scout plane specifically. As you can see, I'm barely losing a meter every time I turn, but it is something that may catch you by surprise every now and then. Another thing to note too is that when you are pressing S going up and turning, it actually causes the turn to be more difficult to fix yourself out of. As you can see, I let go of that when I was facing the other direction, so you actually basically do a full 180 degree turn when you look up and turn at the same time. I'm going to turn my speed back down to lower and get down below the clouds. Alright, so when you're first time up in the sky, basically the moment that you turn yellow, you are going to want to start heading back to the runway. Another thing to note too is, again, you always want to keep in mind where you are going. On the map there, those dark gray blotches there are mountains, so you do want to avoid running yourself into those. You will notice that there are lots of planes of people that did not heed that warning. So we do want to keep our plane up and in the air, and to do so, keep an eye out for these mountains. As you can see, there is many graveyard planes that have that were not paying attention to their radar. So again, I'm at yellow fuel, and the goal is that I want to land this plane. The best way that I can recommend you doing that is by lowering the landing gear and getting yourself to about 20% thrust. 20% thrust, we're gonna stay here until we land, is just enough to keep yourself from falling out of the sky. 15% seems to lower you out of the sky very, very slowly, but as you can see, I am losing altitude. 20% thrust keeps me at the same altitude the entire time, which is why I recommend 20% thrust. So we know the runway is right over there. I'm going to make a turn knowing that I will lose altitude a little bit, so I am going to press S slightly in order to keep my altitude. I'm going to line myself up with the runway very, very slowly. This is about good enough. It doesn't have to be straight on. And as I come to the runway, I'm going to be tapping W to lower my nose. As you see, I gain a little bit of speed, but it's okay. And then we'll touch down, hold down the spacebar, scroll down thrust. It can go negative if you want to, but it doesn't have to. And that will cause you to stop the plane on the runway. Now what we can do is taxi back over to the burritos in order to refuel. And then the next thing that we will be touching on will be the water landings as well. But up until this point, as you can see, you basically have you're able to launch and land your plane as much as you wish. I'm going to pop over here. Hopefully this tanker here has some petrol. It does not. That is unfortunate. I'm going to see if I can move this slightly. Just so that way I can get into the petrol station a little bit easier. I think I'm going to put this guy right here. It's probably full of heavy oil for the fighter planes. It is. Pop back in here. Oh, switch seats. Control 1, by the way, is how you switch seats. Pop out of here. Fill up on petrol. And now that I have some petrol, hold down space. Scroll back. Turn myself towards the airfield. Scroll up all the way to get a little bit of a skid. Nice. Keep myself at 100. Turn to the right. And hold down S and take off. As you can see, you don't need a lot of runway in these scout planes. Alright, so next thing is going to be the water landings. It's the exact same concept. So we're going to, in this case, I didn't raise my landing gear, so I'm still at 30% thrust. Scroll down to 20% thrust, find a nice long stretch of water, and we're going to line ourselves up with said water, and press W to lower our nose, and line ourselves up with the ground, and do a nice light touchdown, and scroll all the way to 0. The brakes actually don't work in this specific case, but as you can see, we can still reverse on the water. And there we go. We have landed ourselves on the water. If we do wish to take off, we do need a little bit of runway here, so we back up just a tad. Turning on the water is much more difficult. As you can see, I am turning, but it is taking a very long time. So you do want to land on a nice flat stretch, but as you can see, taking off from the water does not require you to, does not take a lot of water to take off from. So that is good as well. Alright, awesome. So now that I'm up in the air, I'm going to press F to raise my landing gear. Again, just that way I can't get myself down to 0 thrust. And always maintain a steady altitude even at the lowest speed. Alright, so the next thing to cover is going to be strafing. So if you press right click, you will notice that you will build a line in front of your plane that allows you to shoot your front gun. You have a fair amount of leeway here. At the end of the day, the cursor, so long as the cursor is on something, and this also so long as the plane is able, or you're angled in a way where the plane can actually reach it, as you can see. You keep seeing that my gun keeps snapping downwards. The reason why is because at the end of the day, if you put your cursor on something that, you know, is within reach of the plane, it will simply look down at that point. As you can see, it keeps doing it here. So if I'm put my cursor on this train, it will lower my cursor as much as possible. This is one of the difficulties with Foxhole, and the fact that we are having fights in the air in a top-down perspective. It definitely doesn't make it easy in terms of judging where it is that a enemy plane is in terms of altitude. But if you put your cursor directly on them, it will attempt to shoot that target. The problem is that the further away the plane is, the more difficult that, or the more useless that strategy is, because you do need to lead your targets, and leading your target in an empty space is very, very difficult. So, with this being said, let me get myself a little bit more height. I'm going to get up a little bit up in the clouds here, just that way I have a little bit more space to work with. And typically the way that you ground strafe a target is you hold down right click. I like to keep my mouse in front of my plane, not behind, because what will happen here is that it'll be like as if you're dragging the plane downwards, and it can cause some weird issues. So I like to keep my mouse in front of the plane, and what you do is you hold down shift. Do this very quickly in the beginning. So you're going to hold down shift, notice how low your nose goes, and then come back up. Because it's very difficult in the beginning to judge your altitude. The higher speed that you have, you will notice the faster that your plane will dip, also the faster that you will go towards the ground. Another reason why I like my my mouse in front of my plane is that it allows you to do a nice shallow dive strafe like this. Notice how long I have. Notice also too it screams altitude when I do get low. Whereas if you have your cursor behind your plane, then what will end up happening is that you'll actually go into a really fast dive, which can cause you to crash. So If you would like to start practicing strafing targets, simply choose a target, like for example this right here, hold down shift, come down, strafe it, pretend to shoot. In this case I'm not going to because it is a friendly ship, but if I want to choose, like for example, a bridge over here, right over here, strafe the bridge, fire, and then come back up. One thing about the planes that you may not know is that actually your first couple bullets are both the most accurate and I believe do the most damage. Every subsequent bullet seems to lose 10% of its damage. So one thing to know is that your first couple bullets are the most damaging bullets that you have and the most accurate. So keep that in mind as you are strafing and fighting other pilots. Or ground targets as well. Alright, so now that we've covered basic strafing, one thing that you will note is you should try to, you need to kind of figure out early on the best height for in example, scout plane strafing ground targets. Usually what you like to be is about at the 40 meter altitude, I find anyways. So for example, if I was strafing somebody on the airfield here, I'll gain speed, I'll come down, strafe, 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 pull back up, and then I keep moving around. Again, I am pretty much at full speed right now. I will get about this distance away, turn around, aim down sights, strafe my target, pull back up, and you basically keep doing this over and over again. If you have a little bit more height, you can strafe a little bit better. Or a little bit longer, sorry. But at the end of the day, the closer you are to your target, and as long as you get off those first couple bullets, you're likely to get the kill that you want to. So just something to practice over and over again. Usually in the beginning, a lot of people will end up crashing a plane just because they're not paying attention to their altitude or they're overcommitted to a target. Do not overcommit to a target as best as you can, because another thing to note is that, for example, there's none here, but actually there's trees, also dead trees as well. If you can see the part of the tree, it's going to destroy your plane. So if you run into the tip of that tree, your plane will be destroyed. So keep that in mind. Strafing a target around a tree is, difficult. If you're looking to kill new pilots and you're somebody on the ground, be around a tree, because a lot of people will strafe a tree for too long, and then they will panic and not pull up in time, and they will hit the tip of the tree and they will die. Alright, so now that we've covered that, the next thing to cover will be probably maybe an advanced maneuver, I guess, because at the end of the day, this is pretty much all that there is left to scout planes. So if you want to try something a little bit fun, let's go all the way to the ceiling of the map. So we'll get to maximum height. I'll make sure that I know the general area that I'm over, in this case the airfield. So now that I am at max height, at about 100 meters here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a front flip. So keeping the mouse cursor in front of me, I'm going to hold down right click, I am going to hold down shift, and I'm going to draw a line underneath the plane and back the way that I came. So this is a little bit of a maneuver that can kind of confuse people that are fighting you or trying to strafe you from the back, because a lot of people don't necessarily know how to do that, and scout planes are the easiest planes to do this with. You can do them in fighters, but the physics on those are a little bit different. They're a little bit more loose in terms of maintaining your, what would the word be? Maintaining your horizontal level, I guess. And they have a little bit more forward momentum, so it's more easier to crash those when you do this, but scout planes doing this is actually quite easy. Alright, perfect. So that pretty much covers everything that I can think of in terms of flying planes. I will go over one more thing. And I'll land the plane here in order to show it. You may notice during this entire thing, I'll also make sure to lower my landing gear, get myself to 20% thrust. And here we go, nice landing, hold down space, scroll back if you want to stop faster. Perfect. One thing is that you may notice that my graphics are bad, and the reason for that is because if you go into options and you go under graphics, I should have that at 144, but it keeps changing itself to 60. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to turn your graphics on to pretty low. The lower the graphics that you have, the less frame drops that you have, the nicer it is to fly planes. Turning off your post-processing, or having your post-processing being low, is the reason why nighttime is so bright for me. So as you can see, kind of difficult to see over there, whereas if I turn post-processing to low, it becomes much easier to see. So that's why my graphics are not usually the greatest, is because I fly planes. Is primarily the reason why, and it's nice to have nice low graphics so you have maximum amount of frames and you're not stuttering around while you're flying, you know, overshooting your turns and all that sort of stuff. So yep, that's pretty much it. Keep practicing your flying skills. Look up videos online about different ways to fly planes, strafing strategies, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, hopefully you get good at this, and then you can move on to fighter planes once you are done with scouts.